welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today I want to talk with two experts that are also friends of mine, but probably in an area where as a private practice owner, as a doctor, I don't look at a whole lot, and I prefer not to look at, not to think about, just because it's not really sexy. And that's the area of really network security, HIPAA security, things that, I've got a manual for that. I've checked it off. And I've got some sort of security thing probably on my computers, Norton something or other that I've thrown up there, and I should be fine. And in talking with my good friends, Joe DeLoach and David, I've realized that there's a lot I don't know and a lot I should know. Now, if I'm being honest, that was me a handful of years ago. I still don't know a whole lot compared to these two gentlemen, but I know a lot more now than I did before, and I feel a lot more comfortable in my office based upon the work I've done with them. But I think it's really important for all of us to hear what they're going to share in this discussion because, we work hard to take care of our patients, to take care of our families, to take care of our employees' families, and to have really successful businesses that are important in the community. And I want to make sure that we continue to have those and we don't lose those because of not paying attention to regulations or something worse happening. So before we dive in, I'm going to start with Joe. If you want to introduce yourself briefly to those who may not know who you are.
The last time I presented the introduction, when everybody knows Joe, here's Joe, and they sat down. I'm beginning to wonder if that's a good or bad thing, but most of y'all know me, Joe DeLoach. I'm Chief Compliance Officer for Practice Performance Partners, the new merged company from Practice Compliance Solutions that you've all been familiar with for many, many years. So this is our area of expertise, especially from the legal side of it. Dave's the expert from the technical side, but I think the marriage of the two minds here is going to be very beneficial.
Yep. We'll talk about the marriage later. But David, I've known you for my whole life, so it's fun having a good friend who's done really big things. So introduce yourself to the group.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Dave MacKinnon, run a company called Promethean, and we have a bunch of clients in this space and have worked over the last couple years to kind of polish our offering to make it not only cost effective but also very compliant and kind of handle all the IT stuff so that doctors can be doctors and take care of patients and their practice and not have to deal with the stuff that they're not an expert at.
Yep. And as Joe said, we all know Joe. If you haven't known Joe, you haven't listened to the podcast ever. But Dave, give some of your background. Why, what makes you an expert? Why should we listen to you or what you have to say?
Yeah, so I worked for the government for a while, then NBC Universal, and then I started my own company about 5 years ago now. So I worked for NBC Universal for 12 years, and obviously doing television. Cybersecurity is very important. You can't get taken off the air. You can't you can't be interrupted at all. And so, that's where I really kind of learned the cybersecurity and networking stuff. And then in my own practice, I've been working for a lot of, we have a lot of medical clients, both on the optometry side, but even, surgery centers and just other types of practices. And, that what we found is really interesting is that a lot of these guys were using, their cousin or their friend or whatever to do their IT. And we've come in and kind of brought in a higher level of professionalism, but also tried to defray some of the cost by, grouping like entities together. So here's a bunch of optometry centers. We kind of group them together and they look and act the same way from an IT standpoint. And so we put in the same equipment, the same policies and procedures and everything else. And then you get those economies of scale that you don't get as an individual practice. And so we've just learned a lot over the last 5 years about how to do this, how to do it right, and how to do it without spending, a fortune. And that's, I think, our competitive advantage going forward is being able to do that.
Nice. So glad you both are here. Joe, let's start at the beginning and do a brief history. I'm hoping everybody listening knows HIPAA. and knows what it is. But help us understand really how this, what we're going to talk about, falls under HIPAA. What it is, the landmark case behind it, kind of just what this all entails.
Yeah, it's an interesting history. You really, to totally get it, you do have to go back to the origins of HIPAA, which are ancient, honestly, at this point. I mean, that's a law that was written in 1998, and Dave, more than us, can tell you what IT looked like in 1998 compared to 2025. I mean, probably two complete, universes difference. So the interesting thing, when HIPAA was written, they did have these security standards in place, but they were written based on 1998 knowledge of the internet, of all the things that were going to happen, AI, et cetera, et cetera. So since that time, security's been somewhat of a moving target inside HIPAA, but not that much. Not that much. The original HIPAA security standards were based on three really kind of unique concepts. One was you kind of get to decide what's reasonable. So what kind of server do I have to have? What kind of router do I have to have? What kind of, do I have to consult with an IT person? It was all, you decide. Your job is to protect your patient's record. You decide what's reasonable. That trucked along literally until 2004, or 2024, I'm sorry, 2024. So almost 2.5 decades, they left it in the hands of the provider, essentially. Then there was a landmark case where there was a breach, massive breach of information in a doctor's office. Thankfully, not an optometrist, but a doctor's office. And the breach was very significant. And the doctor was literally compliant with HIPAA under the tenets of the way HIPAA was written. But the ruling was he had privacy manuals, he had security manuals, he had policies, he had a router, he had a firewall, he had fairly decent login credential standards. All the things that most every optometrist out there has. The ruling was, and the cyber criminals are way smarter than that. That's what it boils down to. So they busted right through all of that. The ruling was, you are guilty because, and I'll paraphrase, number one, technology has changed and you haven't kept up. Number two, you're a rich doctor, you can do better than this. And that's paraphrasing almost what they said. So out of that case came the part of the changes that are coming with it's not good enough to just be reasonable anymore. So basically HIPAA is now defining what is reasonable. The last tenet that it was built on was something called scalability, which is HIPAA is very complex. All these requirements are very complex. But if you're a small business, which, in our world, we define small businesses, 600,000, a million, 2 million. Small businesses are like 50 million and under. So, big businesses are Amazon. Small businesses are Aaron Werner's practice. Very successful, but still small business. Yeah. Small business was not held to the same standards. They said it's just logical for us to not hold Aaron and his optometry practice to the same standards that we hold IBM to, or Amazon to, or NBC, or whatever it is. And as we'll find out later, that is the monumental shift in HIPAA, which is there is almost no distinction anymore between small and large business, and we'll get into that later.
Got it. So quite the journey.
$715,000.
$315.
That was the fine.
Oh wow. So are you seeing fines happening now today still with HIPAA when it comes to network security on practices that are small like mine?
So interestingly enough, no one gets fined so far until this for having a dedicated router. The most insecure thing out.
Basic,
Yeah.
right?
What they get fined for is the breach. So it's the
Okay.
result of lack of security. So is that still happening? Yes. HIPAA actually has a post now, a public post, where you can go in and track and so I went and looked a couple of months ago, and so far in 2025, there's 19 eye care practices that have what's classified as a significant breach, which means it meets the standards of being reportable. So reportable breaches are the ones that pay six-figure fines. I think HIPAA estimates the average cost for resolving a breach in 2024 was $900,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
And I imagine that beyond just the HIPAA breaches, because I know an office that got held up with ransomware, and I'm assuming you guys have seen plenty of those as well. What's the typical cost to get away from that?
They have an estimate on that one too. It's about $250,000. I think that's actually high, to be honest with you. But the point is, it's pretty staggering. And I'm glad you said that, because actually ransomware attacks they're a dime a dozen, even inside optometry right now. The massive big breaches, they occur and they're devastating when they occur, but ransomware is something that we get multiple times every single week. I'm sure Dave does too.
Yeah, it's pretty common within all sorts of businesses, right? It used to be that they were going after these, bad actors were going after particular types of businesses, and now it's just a scattershot approach, right? They blast out phishing scams and everything all over the place. They don't care what type of business you are. They're gonna, seize your data. They're gonna disrupt your business, and in order to get it back, you've got to pay the price. And there's kind of that cost, but there's also the reputational hit. There's the cleanup that it takes, right? So I mean, we've had a couple issues where we've had some really minor breaches recently with some of our clients that were caused through phishing, where they kind of exploit a user to click on a link or do something that they shouldn't be doing. And just to clean that up is a couple grand, right? So that's a very basic breach. It's a very, no data was compromised, nothing was taken or dealt with, but just to kind of, somebody clicks on the wrong link and opens themselves up. You've got to go in and kind of double, triple check that the breach didn't go very far. There weren't any other issues, and that's expensive. And so it's kind of one of those things where a dime's worth of prevention saves you a dollar's worth of penalty down the road, whether it's a HIPAA penalty or just the cost of kind of the cleanup. Having that little bit of prevention helps a lot.
Yeah, that's a really big point, because the cost of cleanup far exceeds most of the penalties involved. And the reputational thing is huge, and there are requirements how you have to now protect your entire patient base, and it's ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah.
Literally this morning, my neighbor lives a mile and a half from me. That's my closest neighbor. He came down to my porch and he said, I think my debit card is a problem. Last night I had 27 charges to my debit card between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning. I'm like, you think it's been compromised? Well, he showed me, he said, yesterday I went on this site and I didn't really know, and that's the thing, they don't really know. Well, it was an eBay scam. And these ransom cyber criminals are so smart, and Dave knows this more than me. They are so smart. He showed me the email. I had to study it to figure out it was a scam. They duplicate the wording. They duplicate every single thing. It looks exactly like eBay. And all it takes is the one click, and you're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The biggest ones I see now are like shared folder scams, where you'll get like a Google or a Microsoft alert that someone's trying to share a folder with you, and it's somebody right? So I'll get a link from Aaron Warner, and it'll say, here, I'm trying to share a file with you, and your natural instinct is like, oh, this is important, I'm going to click on it, and then it takes you to a login page, right? And it looks like the Microsoft or the Google login page. You put in your credentials, and that's it, you're done. And then, the other one is with all the digital signing stuff, the DocuSign and those types of things, where someone will send you, a DocuSign that says, open this up to sign it. And it's the same type of thing, right? Like people want to, oh, I'm getting a legal letter, or I got to deal with this, and they'll go in and sign it, or sign in and then compromise their credentials. And so, it's another thing where like simple steps up front can help you. Having like two-factor authentication is a big way to block a lot of that. And there's some active prevention you can do, say after the fact, to actually lock down an account that's been breached. That will save you a lot in the long run, over spending money on somebody like myself to go in and clean it all up.
Yep. Before we get into what we can do to stop, I'd like to go down the road of where we're seeing the most common breaches. Right. So obviously the email phishing scams. You guys have talked about that, and I got 5 last week. Somebody sharing a Google folder with me.
Yeah, those are the
actually
biggest by far.
Went down
Right.
the rabbit hole that your neighbor had here, Joe, when I was looking for new running shoes, and I saw a price. I was like, this is too good to pass up. This is great. There's got to be a sale. And the little angel on my shoulder kept saying, like, something that looks too good to be true probably is. And realized that after doing a bunch of searching and diving into it, that it was definitely a scam site. But it was on the surface, it was tough, and it probably took me 10 minutes worth of diving into it, looking through it to realize that it was.
I think these cyber criminals have more than IT training. I think they have psychology training, because they know how to hook you. In this case, he ordered a welding helmet, and this is one of the big ones we see, and it can be a toner cartridge or whatever it is. It's like, I've been paying $30, and here's a deal for you from eBay, and we'll give you 12 for $10. And it's like, that's impossible.
Yep.
But that inside goes, this is too good. I'm just going to do it. Boom, and they got you.
Fear of missing out, right? This one said there's only 2 left.
Verification of accounts is one we see a lot. Please click here to verify your email with XYZ, and it's not XYZ. Click here to confirm your order. Click here to confirm your credit card information. I mean, it's a lot of confirm stuff. We see a lot of, and we see a lot of it with Amazon, eBay, all these delivery sites. Most of it is linked to some spam China site. And not only will you never get the product, but they just got you on top of that.
Well, and one of the things we've done is it used to be that you could tell when you looked at the link, right? Like you look at the link and it would say like xyz.abc.com or whatever. It'd be some weird URL. And now they've gotten really sophisticated where they're using Cyrillic letters, or they're using some other characters so that Citibank.com looks like Citibank.com. You can't tell the difference. And so what we've done is we actually go to the router and start filtering out those, they're called, the criminal blacklist. So you basically go in there and you list all those URLs that are, kind of known bad actors. And that way, if someone does get the email and they do click on the link, it doesn't go anywhere, right? It basically drops them at a page that says, you can't go any further. And that at least helps, unfortunately, the weakest link in all this stuff is kind of the poorest trained employee, right? The person who's going to click on the link, the person who's going to put in their credentials. And so, we're trying to catch that last person and make sure that we have that last little parachute before they jump off. But yeah, it's becoming more sophisticated.
Are you seeing more issues with hardware scams, like somebody trying to physically tap into a server or a physical device in the office, or is it mostly all software-based, email-based, internet-based?
It used to be the hardware stuff, right? People would try to go in and they try to get into your server or empty your printer or cause some trouble. Everything's in the cloud now. They want access to your documents. Your documents are going to have social security numbers. They might have birth dates. They might have credit card numbers. They might have, all this PII is in there, all this personally identifiable information. And they're trying to attack that. They want your credentials so that they can get access to all that information. And so with our clients, we work really hard to make sure that information does not exist in those documents, right? You have your EHR system, it's in the cloud. All your data, all your PII should be in that system. You shouldn't be downloading it to Excel spreadsheets or PDFs and putting it in your Google Cloud or your OneDrive. That's just opening yourself up to problems. And so, there's things you can do to scan for that to see if there's, dates of birth and social security numbers in your Google Drive or in your OneDrive. But it's really a training thing, right? It's talking to the staff and basically saying, look, every time you take this type of information out of your AHR system, you're potentially opening yourself up to a compromise by having it on your computer or in the cloud. And it's not something people think about. They think, hey, it's in the cloud. I don't have to worry about it. That's Google's problem. That's Microsoft's problem, and I'm safe. Well, you're only as safe as your credentials are, who you've shared that document or that folder with, right? Like yeah, they're going to protect a brute force breach into Google Drive or OneDrive, but that, if I give up my credentials, then they've got access to everything.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to put it
and
into
that goes back to, we were talking about the fundamental of HIPAA, the origins of HIPAA. I mean, HIPAA had nothing to do with all of this when it was written. It was designed to protect patients' healthcare information. HIPAA has nothing to do with protecting healthcare information anymore. No one cares about your healthcare information. They want your driver's license number, your social security number, your email, your credit card number, and as healthcare providers, we are the magic repository of everything an identity theft person needs. And that's why everybody went, why do they pick on doctors? We got the stuff. We got all the data. So we're easy picking.
Yeah, you guys are right targets. And I think the other piece is, with some of the insurance number scams and other stuff that's out there, I mean, there's a lot of, identity theft going on from, as a result of these breaches. And as a practice, you're responsible for all that, right? All the downstream ramifications, not just the reputational impact, but you can be sued for being negligent, not just by the government, but by your patients, right? And so, I haven't seen that so much in the healthcare practices, but in the general market, there's a lot of the class action lawsuit against the bigger employers out there because it costs individuals a lot, not just in terms of identity monitoring or whatever, but if they have to go clean up their credit history or they have to go, deal with fraudulent bank charges or whatever, whoever caused the breach is ultimately, can be found liable for dealing with all those costs.
Yeah, Dave, the reason you haven't seen it as much is HIPAA has a weird thing. HIPAA has no private right of action, except states are now. This is what happened when the government doesn't do what the states want. So HIPAA does not have a federal private right of action, so now the states are introducing it. So now it's not a matter of can my patient sue me, it's what state do I live in, because that state law is going to dictate whether or not the patient can sue the doctor individually for their actions. Regardless of that, it's still catastrophic, to have a really big breach.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, in San Diego, we had a hospital system here who had a fairly sizable breach. And there are people who refuse to go to that hospital, and this is 5 years later, because of that, right? I mean, they are a well-known, well thought of, large hospital practice, and people don't go there simply because their personal information was mishandled.
Yeah. HIPAA can require things like you provide credit monitoring service and things like that.
Right.
If you're a small big business like Aaron Werner Eye Care, just count up the number of patients and multiply that times the cost of credit monitoring per patient for 3 years, and that alone just took a chunk out of your retirement.
big time. So let's talk about what's going to be coming down the line. Here's what I want to go. I want to talk about what we see coming down the line, because I want to end on a positive note, not on a scare note, and what I should be doing today. Like, what are some things that I should be doing today? What are some things that I need to start thinking about doing, maybe between now and the end of the year, so that I can feel like I'm not helpless in this situation. I've got some hope and a game plan going forward.
I'll take what's coming and leave Dave with most of what do you need to be doing. The answers to both of those questions are still somewhat in the gray zone, but to be perfectly honest, Dave's answers are more applicable, because the reality is, regardless of what I'm getting ready to tell you that HIPAA is getting ready to do, what Dave can do for you is already important today. But this is what's coming. What Dave can do for you today, or whoever you work with from an IT standpoint, is dramatically important. What it's going to be mandated they do for you is what I'm getting ready to talk about. So this all is the massive HIPAA. It's the first. It's actually the biggest amendment to HIPAA that's ever been made. There are a lot of changes in the privacy side, which we're really not talking about. But the security changes are literally the bombshell. It's like nothing that's happened in compliance to some degree. The results of which are staggering and complicated and costly. So here's an outline of the proposal. So this amendment to HIPAA it's already law. It's already gone through the Federal Register, but it is not implemented. So
Why is that?
Well, that's a great question. It's not implemented because of the Supreme Court overturning something called the Chevron Doctrine, which, Aaron, you already know about. So the Chevron Doctrine basically said that regulatory agencies have the right and authority to regulate their own laws, and if there's questions, you go to them for the answer. That was thrown out by the Supreme Court, giving authority for every circuit court in Podunk, Pennsylvania, or Texas, or wherever, to make rulings on what HIPAA means, or OSHA means, or EEOC means. In other words, we have created complete and utter chaos in the compliance world. Because of that, I think, this is my speculation, because of that, I think the Office of Civil Rights is sitting back analyzing what's going to happen in the courts when they unveil this monster. And I don't think there's any way to predict what's going to happen, but the point is they've taken authority away from the regulatory bodies, is what it boils down to. So they may pass all this, they may implement all this, and then we spend the next 5 years fighting about a bunch of this in court. And so I think they're sitting back trying to minimize that impact right now, but that's just my guess. We don't know when it's going to be implemented. There were murmurings of end of 2025. I don't think that's going to happen. There's murmurings early 2026. That could happen. I think with the current status of all of this and the current status of what's happening that we just talked about,
Yep.
I think we will see this implemented before the end of 2026, but that's just my guess, okay? So here's the breakdown of what will change. Encryption has never been required by HIPAA. It's always been considered the gold standard. As a matter of fact, it's the get out of jail card. But it wasn't required. That will be required. Not only will it be required, it will be end-to-end encryption will be required. That will be for basically anything that contains or transmits PHI at all, which means basically everything, all your texting, all your emails, all your software data transfers, everything's going to have to be encrypted. They're going to mandate cloud-based storage, which I want Dave to talk about this in a minute. Dave, you put this in your list. I want you to comment on this. Because to my knowledge, almost every single data breach has been in a cloud-based system. We always talk about your office is not secure. Someone could break in and pick up your server and take it home with them,
And walk out with it, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're mandating something that really is where everything's happening. But anyway, mandated cloud-based storage.
Yeah.
There will be a mandate of a testing system where you will be able to go in and test vulnerabilities of your network system. There will be a mandate for what we call penetration monitoring, which Dave can talk about. But it's basically a 24/7 oversight of your system where somebody's just looking for something to happen, literally constantly. Dave said something about multifactorial authentication.
I don't just recommend Peak Pro to my patients. I use it daily, and so does my whole family. Honestly, it's one of those rare products my wife and daughters all love. So much so they actually fight over who stole the tea tree cleanser, the peptide cream, or even the hyaluronic acid. I had no idea this would be the case when I introduced them to the Peak Pro products, but I've learned they're a great company to work with, and their lineup covers everything from daily eyelid hygiene to deep hydration. I highly recommend checking them out. We've got a special affiliate link in the show notes, and use code Warner for 25% off. The way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being.
Never been a mandate, gonna be a mandate. This is going to be interesting. Dave, you might comment on this as well about how that may be achievable. I've had my thoughts on it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of options, but you can comment more. Obviously, that is going to be operationally a big deal. They have not submitted the rules on MFA, so we don't know if it's going to be like every time you log into the computer, only logging into the EHR, only logging in initially to the terminal. We don't know yet. The buzz is it will be every time you access anything. You're going to have to go through an MFA process. The next group is, and I already alluded to this, so the initial security standards in HIPAA, there were 42 of them. So 42 different areas of security that you have to have some answer for in your business. Small practices only had to comply with 20 of those 42. And even at PPP, even to this point, our program is written to comply with what we had to, which is 20 of the 42. They have eliminated that. Even small businesses will now have to comply with all 42 security standards, some of which are quite complicated. We already talked about that scalability issue where, Aaron, you can have a dedicated router and a Dell internal firewall if you want to. No, you can't anymore. You will have to have complex, high security, which Dave can comment. You know, I said this literally in Pennsylvania yesterday, and people were just gasping. It's like the difference between a really, really good router and the one Spectrum gave to you is not a bank breaker at all. That's not really, the equipment side of it, I don't think is going to be the big cost. They are making significant changes in the way you have to do your risk analysis. You have to have inventories of both your firmware and software. You have to have network mapping on site. See, what have I left out? That's enough. That's most of it. There's a buzz that, if we want to look down the line just a little bit further, there's a buzz that they may throw all this out, essentially throw out the entire HIPAA security side of it and just accept or put into place all the NIST recommendations, which
State 100, yeah.
yeah, which take what I just described to a whole another level.
Yeah, on steroids.
Yeah, on steroids. It's going to be hard enough to comply with the changes they just asked. I don't see that happening anytime soon, and Dave can comment because I don't see any way potentially they can be placed into a small business or even large businesses in some cases.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, it would be painful
yeah.
to go to new state on. Yeah.
So that's what's coming. Now, understand, this is like I always say in presentations. These are not good ideas. These are what the law is going to be. This is going to be what you have to do, not what you want to do. So this is sweeping. I can't go through all the additional 22 security standards, but this is a huge deal. So from our standpoint and every other HIPAA compliance company out there, we're in the process of, just tear up the entire security program and rewrite it, because that's what's going to have to happen for us to protect our clients. And why someone like Dave, who used to be a good idea, is probably going to become not a good idea, but an essential.
Yeah, I like being referred to as a good idea.
Because we were just at this meeting yesterday, and I was giving basically this presentation. And so people would come to the booth, say, come talk to me. They come in and say, who's doing your IT? It's exactly what Dave said. Well, my cousin is pretty good at it, and he set up our network and blah, 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 Or, I've dabbled enough with it that I'm pretty comfortable with it. It's like you are delusional at this point. It's no longer you can change your own oil. IT became a factory job a long time ago. And with these security changes, there's no way an individual can handle this.
Nope. Well, I think even irrelevant of what the
Yeah,
requirements
it's too complex.
are. I would just say even irrelevant of what the requirements are, knowing that I'm responsible if my data gets breached. Like now it's being proactive and being protective. It's not like painting over that water spot on the wall, just pretending there's not a water leak behind the wall. Now you've got to really make sure that the plumbing's good and the plumbing's solid and everything's set and secure. Otherwise, the damage coming down the line is worse.
Since we really don't know when this is going to become law or implemented, I'll put it that way. It's already law. When they're going to implement it, I'm finishing the rewrite on our security standards, and I'm introducing all this as the way you should be doing business. I can't say you have to, but from our recommendations, from our company standpoint, these are going to become the standards because they should.
Well, and those are best practices, and they have been, and I'd say in the wider industry, those have been best practices. They haven't worked their way down into various small businesses. But if I were to leave, the listeners with, say, 3 things that you can do not no cost, but low cost or relatively light lift, the biggest one is segment your networks, right? So keep your practice equipment and computers separate from your employees and guests and everybody else. That's the biggest one. The second one is multi-factor authentication. So enforce it, make your employees do it. It's painful, as Aaron is aware, like the turning it on and getting everybody used to it and pulling out their phones to get the text messages and use the authenticator app or whatever. It is painful, but it does prevent so many breaches from going to the next level, right? It stops them at that first, hey, my credentials are compromised, but now they can't get access to anything because they don't have your phone number, they don't have your authenticator app, and so it just stops the breach right there. And then on the backside is using tools to make sure that your software, firmware, operating systems are all up to date. And so, we have some tools that we offer that do that. Most managed service providers in this space have some sort of, kit that they use to put in. For us, we use a combo of an on-site probe that we put on the network that monitors all the network devices and kind of does that vulnerability and penetration assessment. And then we have software that goes on all the computers that basically makes sure that not only are the virus scanners up to date, but all the firmware, the software, the operating system are all up to date, because that's the other the other piece of this, right, is to kind of make sure that any vulnerabilities that are out there are shored up. And those three things, if you do nothing else, if you just do those three things, you increase your survivability of not getting, hacked substantially. Now, there's a whole list of other things that you have to do beyond that, but in the meantime, without spending a ton of money, you can go buy, a segmented router firewall system that'll, do that for you. Implementing multi-factor authentication is essentially free from a cost standpoint. There's some operational cost to it, but it's worth it. And then, there are plenty of low-cost solutions for making sure that software stays up to date. Those three things will really make a difference.
Dave, on MFA, I mean, I personally, I don't know how you've got Aaron doing it in his office right now, but I really don't see operationally how it's possible to use your phone and texting
Yeah.
MFA.
So there's two ways. Yeah. So there's actually two ways to do it, and the newer way is called passkey, which is coming out and is more prevalent now. And you'll notice that typically uses like a face scanning tool or a fingerprint or some sort of biometric. And what that does is it ties the individual machine. So initially you would log in with your MFA token, but once I'm logged into this computer, then it recognizes my face, I type in my password, and it uses those two things to say, oh, you're Dave MacKinnon, you have access to this. That's the next level up. The kind of more complicated it's called passkey. If people with iOS or Android latest phones would have that as well. But that keeps you, you don't have to constantly carry your phone around. You don't have to have every employee use their personal phone or whatever. They use it once just to get in, and then everything after that is passkey. So there's ways to do multi-factor authentication without making it extraordinarily painful. Now, when you first do it, as Aaron can attest to, it is painful. It's brutal, and there's just no way around it, unfortunately. For people that are used to either sharing passwords, never changing their password, or having it on a sticky note on a computer or whatever, it's an operational change. But I can tell you from all the breaches that I've dealt with in medical practices, I want to say 95% of them are compromised credentials. And so the difference between me coming in after the fact and you're going to pay me $2,000 to $2,500 to go clean up a breach at a basic level, right? And just in man hours, that's what it's going to cost you. You can stop that by having multi-factor authentication. It becomes a couple hour exercise to double check that nothing got beyond multi-factor authentication, and you're done. Versus, a day and a half of my time to go in, or one of my guys' time to go in and actually, do a full scope investigation. It's just, it's going to save you time and money. And I think, it's one of those things where it costs you a little bit up front to kind of invest in making that time investment to get people signed up for multi-factor authentication and work through all the pains in the butt it is to get people logged in and do all that stuff. But once you do it, it really will prevent any sort of extraordinary breaches down the road. And it's in my mind, it's a free solution that basically a lot of people don't take advantage of, and it ends up costing them in the long run.
So you made it so for our edification, since I'm an IT novice for all practical purposes. I'm just a compliance officer, but I don't understand all this stuff. But I think passkey probably is the answer, going forward. But you made the comment, once you log in, you're set. So is that what you meant? So that I go in the morning and log into the workstation, and now I don't have to MFA into the EHR or anything like that?
No, it's just a different MFA. So think about it this way. All multi-factor means is that I am entering a password and then there's some other mode to authenticate me, right? Usually it's a text message or like an authenticator app on your phone or something like that, right? That second mode of authentication can be a variety of sources. It can be a fingerprint, it can be a face scan, it can be, there's all sorts of ways, biometric ways to do that. So what a lot of folks are going to is they'll use multi-factor authentication on their phone when they initially log into the computer, but then every subsequent request for multi-factor authentication is a fingerprint or a face scan. And that way I'm not constantly pulling up my phone. It's like I log in, it scans my face, I'm good, I can log into the EHR, I can do what I need to do. As opposed to, hey, I log into the EHR, now I got to pull out my phone, wait for the text message, put in the text, it's just faster and more convenient. I mean, it's one of the things Aaron and I talked about is fingerprint scanners, right? Like they allow you to bypass a lot of that that manual process because it's Windows, right? Windows knows my fingerprint, it knows my I've logged in, knows my fingerprint, and it authenticates me through the system. That's the more convenient way to handle it. There's also, I mean, you see in a lot of bigger hospitals, they'll have badge scanners, right? Which is another option, right? So you on the side of the computer, you have a badge scanner. That's multi-factor. I'm logging in, I'm badge scanning. That's two-factor. Now I'm into the system, right? So, there's a variety of ways to handle it. I think people kind of assume because it's the most common that it has to be a text message or a authenticator app. It doesn't. There's other ways to do that as well. That just happens to be the most common.
So
Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer.
yeah, that's assuming all of our workstations have cameras, which
Right. Yeah.
in my estimation, most don't. We
Well,
don't.
you could fingerprint scanners are fair. Yeah, they're cheap. They're easy.
As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, I just noticed he replaced all of his keyboards, and the keyboard has a fingerprint analyzer on the keyboard.
Right.
So, I mean, he spent some money to do that, but you're going to spend money
Yep.
for
Yeah,
convenience.
but
Money.
a USB fingerprint scanner is like $12 on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, for some of these things cost very little money, and it saves you a ton of headache down the road. I mean, there's a lot that you can do to kind of, essentially you're trying to, think of it like a castle, right? You're trying to build up the walls, you're trying to build a moat, maybe you put in a drawbridge somewhere, but you really want to build up your defenses enough so that no matter, what types of employees you have, how educated they are in IT or how uneducated they are in IT, it doesn't really matter. You're basically saying, at the lowest common denominator level, we're ensuring that no one can get past this secure area. It used to be really expensive. It used to cost you $50,000-$60,000 to buy a router that would do segmented networking and that you could do cloud firewall with and everything else. You can go to Amazon right now and for $1,200 buy the same thing at an enterprise level, right? And so it's less about the hardware cost and more about the configuration cost, which requires somebody like myself or, one of my guys, or it requires, some operational cost in terms of either educating your employees or kind of walking them through the MFA process or whatever the security process is.
I think a good exercise, and this is going to be very basic, it's in the office, but just what we've done working with him. So when he joined us, he said, hey, let me, how secure is your stuff? I'm like, oh, I got a guy. It's great. And Dave handed me my email and said, is it? So it, what I thought was good because I'd been with a guy for a long time, wasn't good. And so he said, hey, here's, let me put this device on. It's going to just basically 24/7 monitor the network. And I'll tell you, what leaks you have. So kind of like doing a home inspection before you buy the house. And he came back and he's like, you got a leaky house. Right, here's all the different open ports. Here's all the different things that somebody could get in if they wanted to. And, we had a Wi-Fi system, but the Wi-Fi system had one network that was everybody on it, all employees, all the equipment, all the devices, and then one guest network. And everybody had the password for both because it just taped up on the wall because it was easy. He's like, said, no, let's bring in a little bit more of a secure system. All of your office computers are on one Wi-Fi network, and only you have the password for that. All of your employees can access network 2, which is a little bit less restrictive, but still very restrictive. They can't go to naughty sites. They can't go to different things that they don't need to access when they're at the office. And there's the guest network. That way they were segmented. And at first it was a little bit of an inconvenience because, people felt like they were being demoted because they didn't know the special passwords to get to everything. But once we got it set up, it was very easy. This next one, because we got hit with and started getting all these the Google file share requests that we had talked about earlier, we turned on two-factor authentication in our Google network system, and I thought we were solid because I've got the paid Google workspace that's HIPAA compliant, and hey, we're great. And Dave looked and said, hey, number one, we're turning on two-factor authentication. Number two, you need to stop have your account being the management account.
Super admin.
The super admin,
Yeah.
because somebody gets into your system, they can control everything. And I said, well, I am the super admin. He's like, no, dummy, just create another account that's a super admin, and then your everyday account is just a regular user like the rest of them. And yes, you can know the password for the super admin, but don't use that on a daily basis. And which makes sense, but I hadn't thought of it. So we created a super admin. I've got a virtual assistant, Mariana. If you worked with me, you've met Mariana. She had my ability to log into my account. He said, no, don't give her that. Create another account for her, and then give her delegation permissions to your calendar so she can still keep doing what you're doing. It just makes sure it's safe. And it's kind of like having somebody babysit your kids at your house. You still don't give them the combo to the safe in the garage, right? There's just some securities that you put into place. And two-factor authentication on my phone is a pain in the ass, right? But now that we've got it set up, it really is just kind of what we do on a daily basis. So it was a pain in the ass for a week. I heard complaining from the office for a week, and then it died. And everything still runs better, but we're even more secure. I think, long story short, moral of the story rather is that, I thought I was doing everything right, and we just needed to adjust and adjust and adjust. So it's a small pain for, now I sleep better at night knowing that what they click on, hopefully is going to slow down anything bad. Now, there's some other things Dave's suggested that I'm not ready for yet, and we keep having those conversations.
Well, yeah, there's always trade-offs, right? Like, yep. I mean, and that's the thing for your listeners and for folks in your position is to understand the trade-offs, right? Like,
yep.
There are systems that we could implement at Werner Optometry that would make it, uber secure, and no one would ever be able to get in there. But is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like, is the cost worth the pain and whatever the potential bad outcome is? And, having a discussion like you and I've had where it's like, hey, we could do this. It's going to cost X. It could save you Y. Do you think that's worth it to you or not? That's the type of conversation that, folks in your position need to be having with whoever's handling their IT, yep. Right? Is what's that cost benefit analysis to go to the next level? And I think what people will find is it's a lot lower cost than it used to be 5 years ago. And they should do it. If they're not going to be forced to by the government, they probably should do it anyway.
Yep. So yeah.
Well, one thing I'd like to throw in, it's a huge misunderstanding. When I talk to clients, they're like, oh, I know, Aaron's got a big old practice, Lori Sorensen's got a big old practice. They're the ones that are going to get hit. The reality is, it's the small fish that get caught. Most of the stuff we have dealt with are very small practices because they had minimal security. And you said earlier, I mean, these phishing attacks, they just throw a huge net. They're not going in and saying, oh, what are the $5 million practices in the United States? No, they just throw this net that goes over everyone. And the small fish are the ones that get caught more often than anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's outsourced now. I mean, if you go on, some of the publications, there's dark web kits you can get right now that will go out and you basically outsource your hacking, right? So bad actors will go in and essentially pay a third party to go out and do some of this phishing, on their behalf, and you don't have to have a target list of companies. Right? Like, a lot of times you're just buying an email list from somebody that has 10 million emails in it, and you're just scattershotting all 10 million, and you hope that maybe 5 or 6 turn out. And so they're not targeting. They have no idea how big your practice is, and frankly, they don't care. They're just looking for results, and that everyone's vulnerable, unfortunately.
Yep.
Oh, and it's very profitable. You were wanting, Aaron, you were talking about
Sure.
specific things in optometry. This was 6-7 years ago. A friend of mine in Texas hired a lady, and within the first month, she had downloaded the entire patient database with all their emails and sold it all to the dark web. Well, come to find out, she's already been to prison to do this once, and then she did it again. So, it's something I like to call the 1% majority rule. That people go, well, what's my real risk of getting caught? Well, it may be 2%, but it just became 100% when it's you. And
Right.
this is in the grand scheme of things, what we can do, what Dave can do from a protection standpoint, and from the costs of those protections, they're minuscule compared to what happens when it goes south.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
For
And
sure.
quite frankly, as a consumer, an individual, I don't care how big your company is. I think you should protect my data, right? No matter what.
Right.
And so no, this has been very helpful and informative. Hopefully that everybody listening, you're not walking away from this with doom and gloom, but optimistic that hey, there's things that I can do. There's things to be on top of this, and and knowing that we've got support. The Dave from the hardware expertise, the network, the physical kind of know-how and how to set things up, and then Joe with the legal behind it, the training tools, the compliance tools. So it's not just me having to create these the compliance training stuff for my teams when we do need to review. Right, we've got the annual review. Quite frankly, when we started getting all the phishing emails, we had another office meeting just to review that again, to make sure that everybody's aware. But mistakes happen, and people are people, and so then we've got Dave to, except he just dropped off. But we've got Dave to to help when the back end. So we've got the protection on the front end, protection with the hardware, the software, the knowledge base, and then we don't have to call you guys to fix things. Hopefully, so. Cool.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, Joe and Dave, thank you guys very much. I will make sure to put your contact infos in the show notes. That way, anybody who's listening, if they want to reach out, they can reach out and get a hold of you. Have a conversation. I think it's worth the conversation. We can no longer, my little soapbox, we can't survive by putting our head in the sand and saying, I don't know what's going on. Right? It's important and imperative that as business owners, we are aware. Joe, I'm pretty sure there's a statute somewhere that says, ignorance isn't a defense. If we're doing this, you've got to know all the rules of the game and be aware of it, and appreciate having experts like you guys that we can tap into.
Absolutely.
So.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.